It happens occasionally, a mother recently told me last summer, after we had spent almost 20 minutes looking for her 10-year-old son. He was with us in the church and outside as we walked around the rectory garden, and then suddenly we realized he wasn't with us, and we frantically began to search for him. Just before we found him, or I should say, he found us, his mother had said to me, "My child says he will be somewhere, and when I look for him, he's not at the specified location." I never handle these situations well. My heart beats faster, I sweat, and my head fills with every missing child report that I have ever heard. The worst case scenarios crowd my thoughts as my imagination heightens my anxiety to alarming levels. Just as the panic of what could be starts to completely take my logical brain captive, I see the back of his head. He turns around, I catch a glimpse of his smiling face, and I breathe a sigh of relief. I act really cool with him while he tells me what happened. And then all of my fear gets boiled down to some misunderstanding about the location or the time. Now, perhaps not every parent immediately jumps to the most horrendous conclusions as quickly as this mother experiences. But I think it seems to be a common fear. Why else would a missing child story suddenly capture the country's attention and demand headline news captions for days? We find some resonance in the terror that someone we love is vulnerable and could be hurt. Perhaps the panic is as old as Jesus. After all, we do read about events in his life in the Gospel of Luke. And I imagine that Mary's anxiety was heightened even without the help of a 24-hour news cycle. Jesus' life had always been in danger. Mary could have been stoned while he was still kicking inside her womb. And then we find out that those wise men who came for a visit were unknowingly part of a devious plot to kill her child. Herod had sent them to Bethlehem to gain insight on the possible competitor that might occupy Herod's throne. So since the Annunciation, Mary understood the importance of her child, but her adoration must have been matched by a sense of fearful foreshadowing. If she worried, it was not in vain. We are reminded of Mary's terrible love when we see the anguished beauty of Mary's face in the Pietà, holding her full-grown son as he's taken off the cross. She enfolds him, and as our eyes trace the lines of her mournful face, we feel the depth of sorrow of a mother who loses her child in the height of his life. This iconic image reminds us of the combination of anguish, concern, and of love that binds our families. One of the most fragile glimpses into Mary's parenting can be found here in Luke when we read, "His mother treasured all these things in her heart." Yes, Mary is blessed among all women, but that blessedness comes with a great burden of responsibility. And with all of that, Mary models for us how to ponder the mystery of God's love as it unfolds in our everyday lives, and to learn to treasure rather than to fear or to anguish those events that are both good and bad in our lives. She shows us a bit about life in general because Mary learned to treasure things. And even in those times when she was frustrated with Jesus for disappearing and allowing her to think that the worst had happened to him, she treasured things. In the cries of sleepless nights, in the drain of exhausted days, in the thrill of first words, and in the fear of parental love, Mary pondered and treasured things. Like Mary, I too have had to ponder the mystery of God's love in my life many times. And particularly at this time, I am pondering. I am trying to understand God's will for me. Because last week, I was informed by my provincial superior that I am being transferred from Boston to Washington, D.C. As of August the 1st, I will be living in Washington, D.C., and I will be a preacher who proclaims the good news by giving parish missions throughout the United States. Unlike Mary, when the angel appeared to her at the Annunciation, I am more saddened than confused, more shocked than surprised by the news. How can it be that after 11 years of ministering to the people of God here in Boston, is it that I have to move on like Abraham and begin anew? As sad as I was and still am by this news, I have turned to Mary every day and have asked her to give me that gift of pondering God's will, and like her, to listen to what God is saying to me and my own personal protests. Mary, our mother, who pondered and treasured everything in her heart, knew how to be amazed and blessed by God. May God grant me the wisdom and love so that I might learn to do the same.